Right, it's time to peel our nacelles. The nacelles have been fully light blocked now, which means we won't have any issues with light bleeding through them. So now we can just go ahead and peel off the tape. And as we can see, it's all black on the inside, and the outside is still the nice primer white. Now we have these things blacked out, the process is simple enough. We need to do all of the internals, so we need to put in the buzzard LED, the tape, the navigation lights, and the small clear sections for the buzzards. We then need to assemble the case into its final glued together form, complete with its grille. We then mask off the grille and the buzzards and the two navigation lights, put in putty around the edges to try and reduce those seams, hit the whole thing with grey, and we'll end up with a complete nacelle with our 3 wires coming out here. Now that those are peeled, we can really make some progress with the internals. So, I'm going to start with the flashing LEDs, as they're the most delicate and finicky piece. So, we've got, just as an example, I have one of my 2mm LEDs in there. I'm going to use some of this copper circuit board. This is the stuff that I marked up previously and got wrong, so you know, we're always recycling stuff. And what's going to happen is, this piece of circuit board is going to sit at the end here, with wires going to and from the LEDs at the top and bottom. Each one of these will have a resistor, depending on whether it's green or red. And very simply, these short wires going off to the LEDs to allow it to be placed together. And then it'll have the appropriate long pieces of wire for the negative and incoming. The LED tape will be a similar affair, where I'll just simply place the tape on here, and the wires will come around the back of the foam and out into the pylon. And for the buzzard, there'll be a small piece of copper board with the resistor for the red LED that will sit at the bottom, with the wires coming underneath the foam, just like that. That will then come around the front of this piece of foam and down into the pylon. Once I have all of the wires coming out of the nacelle, the positives can then be joined, which will link off to the buzzard and to the main primary incoming, and the 555 and 12 volt negatives can be separated and kept running in parallel. Alright, this is the first stage of the assembly. I created this squid that will sit at the rear of the nacelle. 2 pins going off to the LEDs, one going into the resistor and one coming out at the end of the LED. I've got 2 of these, one for each, and they'll sit very nicely like so, giving power to the LEDs. Once it's in place, as I mentioned before, the wires will simply come out around the back into the pylon, where it'll join in with the rest of the wires. Because I'm working with such small LEDs, I'm going to go ahead and use one of my crocodile clips to try and keep the heat mitigated. So I'm just going to bring it across like so, and that should act like a big heat sink and just prevent the LEDs from any chance of overheating. I've got my 2 squids hooked up to my breadboard just to test to make sure I haven't destroyed anything. Yeah, looks good. Alright, the first step here is to nestle the bottom LED in place so that it can't go anywhere. So at this stage it's just going to keep popping out of its hole. To secure it in place, I could use some hot glue, but I think my good old trusty PVA will do just fine. Now that the glue is fully dry, we just need to prevent any backlighting from the LED, and we can do that extremely simply with a nice thick bit of black insulation tape which will also have the added benefit of helping to anchor it down even more securely. Just take a small bit off. It's a bit wide, so I'll just trim it down. With that all done, I created this small little bit of circuit board to do the nacelle strip and of course the front buzzard, which is literally a very simple circuit with the resistor for the LED and inputs for the 12 volt LED tape. And the way that's going to sit is if I grab the appropriate piece here, I'll just cut a small niche into the foam there. This goes in upside down, the wires go around the back of the foam, and then that just sits in front of it like so, and then the LED sits up in the buzzard section. That was the plan. However, I'm not impressed with the brightness of the LED, so instead I've decided to go for a plan B that I was considering earlier, whereby I'm going to go back to my LED tape vendor, get some red tape, and then fashion it into a shape which will fit into the buzzard. This will ensure that I have the same brightness as the actual nacelle, not to mention having the LEDs pointing in the right direction and generally getting a pretty good fill for it. Because the LED tape is far too bright as it is, I'll determine what sort of resistor I need to reduce the brightness to a good level, but that sort of testing will come when I've got the front tape. But until that arrives, I'm Raven, and that's all from the desk.